Hi everyone, hope we're doing well. The weather's starting to get a little bit warmer in the UK, so I decided that now was a really good time for me to make another version of my distressed mesh freeform jumper, because I would say that's probably my most worn crochet jumper, and it's perfect for all year round, but especially when it's warmer weather. I like wearing stuff like that just over a vest, just because it's a really easy way to elevate your outfit without adding an awful lot of layers that's going to make you warmer. And I am planning on refilming the tutorial for that jumper. I'm going to share with you guys the process of not only me designing this jumper, but also how I'm going to crochet and construct it. So before we get into things, let's just talk about kind of our plan of action. My boyfriend got me some bamboo cotton yarn, and I've been working with bamboo yarn quite a lot recently. It is quite expensive, so that's definitely a downfall, but what you get is kind of the breathability of cotton, but the fiber is just so much softer, so especially for garments, a bamboo cotton mix is really nice, especially for summer. So I have this sand color, which I'm kind of gravitating towards. I do also have this same yarn in dark brown, but I feel like I want to save this for a different project. I feel like the sand is going to be something that I'd wear a lot more in summer. This yarn is pretty fine, and its recommended hook size is a 2.75. But for this jumper, I'm actually going to use a 4mm hook, just because, especially if you're new to freeform crochet, using looser stitches is going to allow everything to stretch a little bit more. So when it comes to building your panels, you have a little bit more forgiveness if something kind of goes a little bit wrong, because I feel like it's easier to block kind of looser stitches into a shape that you want, as opposed to really tight stitches. I will also say with any sort of textured stitch like this, a cotton or something that doesn't have a lot of fuzz or fur is just going to look a lot better, because with a project like this, I feel like the star of the project is the stitches that I use rather than the yarn or the color of the jumper or the construction of the jumper. So I really want to pick a yarn and hook size that's really going to show off my stitches. Currently, I've got 200 grams of this yarn, which I feel like is going to be more than enough. I will say, if you're following this tutorial, any hook, any yarn, whatever, it's 100% fine. You do not need a specific yarn with a project like this. But if you're deviating a lot from the yarn that I'm using, so let's say you're using a really chunky acrylic yarn, you just need to be aware of what that yarn is going to do for your piece. So in the case of chunky acrylic, obviously you're going to be able to build up your stitches a lot quicker, but your stitches are just going to naturally be a lot bigger and the piece is going to be bulkier. Also with acrylic, it's just a little bit of a warmer textile, so as long as you're okay with that, go ahead and do that. But for me and what I want out of this jumper, this yarn choice and hook selection is probably going to be best. But in no way does that mean that you have to do exactly what I'm doing. What I'm going to do now is I want to sketch up kind of what I'm thinking of doing, because actually a lot of the planning that I do for my crochet pieces happens inside my head, but obviously I can't show you that. Right, so this is a very rough sketch, but what I'm going to start off with is making two panels that look like this. I'll probably start with this rectangle here and then do a few kind of decreases around here and then work up a straight panel here and add a small neckline. And what I'll probably do is I'll start by making kind of like a corner section like this, and then I'll start to build up kind of sections around it. I'm going to be randomly adding extra pieces, so obviously all of this would be stitches. And once I've reached the width of the panel, what I'll do is I'll kind of close off this corner and then slowly build up the top as I go, kind of in whichever way feels right. And what I'll do is I'll just create one rectangle, and I might do it so the bottom is a little bit tighter than the top, but I'm not too mad at that. To be honest, that's probably something I can block into the piece. And then around this point, obviously I'll do some decreases either side. And then finally, I'll build up and do this final thing. Now, when it comes to the sleeve, for something like this, I am thinking about potentially adding a cap sleeve, but I think I've mentioned this before. My preference when it comes to designing is to create a few steps at a time and then make my next decision. Because to be honest, when I've done those 2 panels and I attach them together, it might not even need a cap sleeve. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna wait till I get to that point and then I can construct the sleeves. I think with this design, the sleeves are gonna be easiest because that's something that I'll probably be able to get away with working kind of almost in the round, which is more similar to the technique that I used in my last distressed which is something that I used in my last distressed mesh freeform jumper. I don't know why I picked that name because it's so hard to say. I have trouble saying most things though. Right, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get started on that jumper now. I will update you guys once I've done a little bit of it. I've started my first little square that I'm gonna build upon, and I decided to include a few mesh stitches just to add a little bit more texture to the start of this piece. I love this yarn and I love the feeling of it. The only problem that I do have is sometimes it does split. And from my experience, if you use a larger hook size than your yarn suggests, it's a lot easier to not let that get in your way. But also that is a problem that I have experienced with other bamboo yarn, and I guess it's just the way that it's wound. So that is something to keep in mind. I can't speak for all bamboo yarn, but the bamboo yarn that I have used, there is definitely an issue of yarn splitting. So if that gets on your nerves, I would definitely keep that in mind. I'm now going to show you kind of what I do to grow this into the panel. So I left this long end just so I can sew everything in once I've finished these panels. This is definitely something I like to do quite a lot, is you save on sewing in ends. But what I'm gonna do so this doesn't get in my way is I'm just gonna single crochet this up here, because I know that I'm not gonna be adding any more stitches here, because if you imagine my panel is gonna be kind of like this and growing up. So we'll grow this side sideways and this side upwards, but there's gonna be no more stitches added here. So let's just go ahead and do that now. And then when I've got just a little bit of thread left, what I like to do is I like to chain just a few, and then this final chain I will tighten like this. So now everything is out of my way and pretty secure, but when I'm ready to use this end, all I need to do is pull this here and everything will come undone. And I actually decided to do half double crochets just because it doesn't tighten this side of the fabric, which will give me a better gauge as to the final size of this panel. So now all of that sorted, I'm gonna start building a little bit kind of here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna chain 2, turn my work, and just do a few double crochets. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make kind of like a little distress stitch by starting off with what would be a double crochet. And then in the next few stitches, I'm just gonna pull up a few loops like so, and then yarn over, pull through the loops. You can do 2 at a time. I like to kind of do them randomly just because I think that looks a little bit better. That's created this kind of cluster here. What I'm actually going to do is pull up another loop and just do a single crochet to separate it a little bit more. And as I say, I'm going to build up this section here. So I'm actually going to turn my work so we can build up a few more rows to build some length. And I'm just kind of placing stitches wherever they feel right. So I'm actually going to combine these 2 stitches here, chain 1, and put my double crochet in my turning chain, because I actually want to keep this line pretty straight, because if we remember, this is going to be the bottom of our panel. So you can see now that I've kind of built up a few stitches to create the straight line. My goal now is to fill this section in here, and now I have this line to work from. I can kind of experiment more with the stitches that I use. So I've chained 2, and I'm going to enter a double crochet into this area here. I actually am gonna do another one here, and I can see that I have a bigger hole here, which I think I want to work a few double crochets into. If I have a look at my work and kind of how it's all kind of panning out, I can see that I can probably attach this part of my project here. So I'm just going to do a single crochet here. And as you can see, it's all laying flat. What I'm going to do is show you what this would look like if I did something wrong. So if I take out this single crochet and add a few more double crochets kind of around this area here, and I am going to do a single crochet into a similar area, what we can see happens is this starts to go down, and if I gather it all and try and make it so this line is flat, you can see these two parts start to kind of like come up, and that's because there is just too much material around this point. So the fix is literally just going and undoing a few stitches and then retrying your piece. And as you can see, that lays a lot nicer. We have quite a lot of solid stitches so far, so I think I want to add some kind of like rip or bigger hole around this area. So I'm going to extend my loop on my hook like this, and then yarn over and pull that through without tightening this here. This creates this long chain, which I can then use to double crochet. Maybe let's go here and see if that works. So that actually lays pretty nicely. What I'm gonna do is work back down here and probably back up. Right, I'm gonna do just a double crochet into this part here. Again, this kind of adds a little bit more texture because we are separating this to create two holes rather than one. And if everything is laying flat, I can see I probably need to chain a few before I reattach some double crochets here. And I'll just do a few more double crochets. And to me, that looks good. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna build up this panel a little bit more, and I'll show you guys what everything looks like once I've worked on it a little bit. I just had my lunch and I thought I would give you guys an update to show you the progress. So I've been crocheting for around 2 hours and I've just completed the width of the panel. I determined this measurement literally just from holding this panel up to my body. And as you can see, I'm kind of going for something in between skin tight and baggy. Like I do want it to hug my body, but I definitely don't want a tight fitting garment. So I settled on this width. I think the stitches are looking really cool. I would say I've done a very similar freehand sort of design as to the first version that I did. The only difference is there's more solid blocks of just double crochets or just mesh stitches. Also with this pattern, I don't do any triple crochets and just stick into double crochets and chains, as well as the extended chains and the stitch where I pull up a bunch of loops from other stitches. That kind of creates a more opaque fabric. I'm really happy with how this is turning out. My goal is just to build up the length of this panel up until I have the length of the 0.2 inches underneath my armpit to where I want the jumper to hit on my hips. But I'll update you guys once we hit that point in the project, so we can do the decreases either side and start building up kind of the final portion of our panel. And while I've been crocheting, I've been watching the new season of All Stars, which I hope stays good because so far it's really good and I'm really enjoying it. And a lot of the time I feel like a RuPaul's Drag Race season will start like that, and then by the end of the season I'm just not interested anymore. And then also I've been listening to a lot of Melly, which is an artist that I definitely listen to a lot more in the summer. And if you guys have never listened to any of her music before, I would definitely highly recommend, especially now the weather's warmer. Her stuff is just such a vibe. So it's the next day and I'm ready to show you guys my progress. This is what it looks like at the moment. As you can see, some of these stitches are freeform, but a lot of this panel actually ended up being just kind of rows of normal stitches. And I almost think the contrast between the patches advantages of stitches that are just typical versus the freeform stitches is really cool. I will say that it's probably easier to do those bigger portions of stitches that aren't freeform around the edge, just so it's an easier way to get a straight line. As you can see, it's definitely not a perfect rectangle, but as I said before, they should all block out fine. My goal now is to build up kind of the next portion of this panel. I'm going to show you guys where I'm going to place my decreases and how I'm going to do all that. Because we're not working with numbers in the same way that we usually do, I'm going to kind of treat this a little bit differently than I normally would, where I'm not going to consider the stitches in the middle so much as the stitches that I'm leaving out either side. My goal is to leave out 6 stitches on either side of this panel. So I've got my yarn here. I'm going to do 6 single crochets. Actually, no, I'm going to do slip stitches instead. I've just slip stitched into my 7th stitch because I want 6 stitches to be out, so we have to start from that 7th stitch in. What I'm going to do is I'm going to chain 2. Instead of placing my next stitch into this stitch here, I'm going to skip that and work into this stitch here. So that means that this turning chain is almost going to create a slope. And now I'm just going to carry on with my stitches all the way up until I reach the other end of this row. Right, so I'm at the other side. I need to leave out 6 stitches. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that means my final stitch needs to go in here. But if we remember on this side, there was that stitch that we left out here. So I'm actually going to skip this stitch and work a double crochet into this stitch here. So again, double checking that I've got 6 stitches out the end here. And I'm actually going to work the next row similarly to the row that I've just done. So I'm going to start by chaining 2, turning my work. And then I'm actually going to skip this double crochet here and work my next double crochet into this stitch right here. And again, I'm just going to work all the way up until I reach the other side so I can mirror what I have just done. So I'm now at the end of the row, and these 2 stitches right here are the 2 chains, and this is the top of my double crochet. So what I'm going to do is skip the top of my double crochet and work into my 2nd turning chain, and this is going to mirror what was happening on the other side. And as you can see, we've created these 2 slopes here. I've just finished the body of my jumper, so it's time for a progress update. This is what it looks like, and I'm really happy with how it looks, but I haven't tried it on yet, and to be honest, the fit looks alright, but we're gonna double check just in case. This is what it looks like. This fit is quite nice, where it's kind of hugging my body, but it's not super tight. I was considering whether I wanted to do a cap sleeve with this jumper. Not gonna lie, I almost feel like looser sleeves are gonna look better, or at least I want the sleeves to be a little bit baggier than the body is. What I think I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go away and work on one sleeve and kind of create a rough plan, and I will update you guys once that is done. So you guys, the jumper is completed. I used around 120 grams of this bamboo cotton, and the jumper's turned out really cool. I'm gonna show you guys what it looks like on, but before I do that, I'm gonna give you guys the steps that I took in between the last update I gave you guys and now. I started the sleeves, and for me, I don't think a cap sleeve was necessary for this design. I just started with 1 round of double crochets, and I noted how many double crochets I put in each part of the round. And from then on, I just built up rows using double crochets and mesh stitches, and I also threw a few extended chains in there, as well as a few distressed freeform stitches. With the sleeves of this jumper, I didn't really feel like I needed to do an awful lot, just because I feel like the freeform stitches in the body are enough. And to be honest with you guys, there would be a lot more effort that I would have to put into building these sleeves. The difference between what I did and doing the sleeves in the same way that I did the body, there would be a big difference in effort, but I don't think it would be worth it aesthetically. So actually that did mean that these sleeves didn't take me nearly as long as these first two panels. I reckon both of these sleeves probably took me around 3.5 hours to do together. I did a total of 45 rows to create the sleeves, and I finished it off just with a round of single crochets just to tighten the cuffs a little bit. And then finally I sewed in the ends with this piece. I didn't know whether I wanted to keep the ends loose. I feel like with the first version of this jumper, it was a lot more striking because of how big the holes were. So I feel like that was a little bit more of a statement piece, and the loose ends kind of looked good with it. But I do feel like with this jumper, because it looks a little bit more neat and a little more day to day, I feel like having a little bit more of a cleaner, streamlined look makes it look a little bit more professional. From my point of view, keeping the ends out in this project would not add to the distressed effect so much as make it look less complex to make. I suppose I should say looks like it was made with less skill, even though obviously it wasn't. And when it comes to blocking, I haven't blocked it yet, but I will give this a block at some point. Right, that is enough blabbering from me. This is what she looks like. This doesn't really have a front or a back, but I think at the moment I do prefer this side to be the front. This jumper's really light. I'm definitely happy that I picked a 4mm hook, because I was considering doing an even smaller hook, but I feel like the bigger hook size made this even more meshy and light. I'm gonna show you guys what this looks like on. I think I got the fit pretty correct. Not gonna lie, I love the way that this fits. The arms could do with a little bit more length, but I'm hoping that that gets fixed when I block it. But if not, obviously it's so easy for me to just go in and add a few more rows. Actually, the panels turned out really nice, and the seams don't really pucker out too much, which my sewing skills aren't great, so I'm happy that that kind of disguised quite nicely into the material and didn't really throw off the shape of the jumper. I do think I want a version of this in black, maybe even for autumn. I might create like a kind of version of this that is modified to be a little bit warmer, because I do like the look of this distressed mesh top with the finer mesh. I would say this is probably like the more grown-up version, or the more kind of mature version of this distressed mesh jumper. I still love the other one, and as I said earlier in this video, I am gonna refilm a tutorial for that, so I will be making another version soon. But no, this is really cute, and I'm definitely gonna get a lot of wear out of it. So I'm gonna leave it there. Let me know if you enjoyed this video. I'm experimenting with a little bit of a new format, so let me know if you guys enjoy it. Other than that, make sure you like this video, comment and subscribe. Go and check out my written patterns that I sell on Etsy and Ravelry, which are linked below along with all of my other social medias. Right, thank you guys for watching. I will see you guys next week. Have a good rest of your day, and I will see you later. Bye.